Um, this is the first time we're doing a hybrid meeting. This is the first time we're holding a physical meeting in the new Metro Plan headquarters. So we're working out some of the technical difficulties. I think it's all going to go really well. If you'll just bear with us while we get all the gears to mesh and let everyone in the room, I would appreciate it. I think we'll be starting in just a minute or two.
Shall I start now or?
You're ready? I think we're ready.
I think we can start. So we're getting meeting to order. I'm Jim McCarthy, the temporary chair. Rosie, could we get roll call, please?
Yes, I apologize for the delay. Thank you, Chair McCarthy. You are present in person today. Patrice Horseman,
Present.
thank you. Geronimo Vasquez,
Present.
Austin Aslan,
I'm here and happy to be.
Regina Salas,
Present.
thank you. Dan Okoli stepped out. He'll be right back. He is present. Jesse Thompson,
Here.
thank you. We have Metro Plan staff, Jeff Milbeck,
Here.
Dave Wessel,
Good morning, everyone.
and myself, Rosie Ware. Good morning. Others in attendance, I show that we have Jason James with ADOT,
Here.
Ed Stillings with FHWA,
Yes, good morning.
Kevin Adams with RTAC.
Yes, good morning.
Thank you. Dana Biskin with Burgess and Knightful,
Good morning.
and Joe Galley with the Flagstaff Chamber of Commerce.
Morning.
Did I miss anyone? Well, if not, Chair McCarthy, that concludes the roll call.
Thank you for doing that. Rosie, if I'm not mistaken, we do not have any public comment at this point. Is that correct?
That is, Chair McCarthy, that is correct.
Next item is approval of minutes. You need to put the version. So
Yes.
the answer questions, minutes from the June 2nd meeting. If not, could I get a motion from someone to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
And who was the second?
Jesse.
Okay, Jesse was the second, Patrice Horseman was the first. So all those in favor of approving the minutes as written, please say aye, and I will say aye.
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 Have any in opposition, any no's? Apparently, we don't, so the minutes are approved with a unanimous vote. There are no items on the consent agenda this month. So we move down to Roman numeral 3, letter A. And Jeff Milbeck. The financial report.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, working with the time into helping make sure that it, that it would work. So if there are any issues and something isn't working for you, let me know. We'll, do our best, and then we'll learn from this experience and keep improving as time goes on.
Are you guys at MetroPlan?
Yes, we are at MetroPlan headquarters.
There's 4 of us here and everyone else is online. So Jeff, go ahead.
Okay, so the fiscal year 21 year-end financial report. This is, I believe, a very brief item. I shared with you at our last meeting what I anticipated our closed budget for fiscal year 21 would be. I'm pleased to say that we're under budget on salary and benefits as expected. I was concerned operations might go over. In fact, it came right on budget. We're like 12 cents under budget on a $64,000 budget. So happy for that and appreciate Rosie and Dave and everyone managing to that budget. And then travel, of course, was still way underspent because of COVID. And there haven't really been any changes with capital projects. It's been as anticipated. So again, I can talk through the staff report. I think this is the 3rd time you've seen these predictions. They've all pretty well played out, if not the same, slightly better than anticipated. And Mr. Chairman, that concludes my report unless there are questions.
Do we have any questions from the board? Well, hearing none, let's move on to B. And Dave Wessel is going to talk about the project priority matrix.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board, David Wessel, Planning Manager at the MetroPlan. This is an action item coming out of the retreat to review the matrix. I have a short presentation I'm going to share with you now. If I can find the right one.
So you'll I'll stop sharing. Great.
Are you all seeing my PowerPoint presentation at this point?
No, we're looking at a written document.
Okay, let's try this. How about now?
We're seeing project priority settings.
Excellent. That's where we're at. Okay. So as I mentioned, this came out of the advance with a very direct work plan objective to work through this matrix basically this year. And why do we do this? We're doing this so that we can look at our priorities in the context of other transportation activities in the region. We have a reasoning and explanation behind the priorities we set, and it also clarifies our role in a given project. It also is an aid or assistance in resource management if we put an assignment, if we put our programs together. As far as the programs are concerned, using the priorities from this matrix exercise, we can determine which projects, planning projects that will lead, which funding projects, such as grant pursuit, that we will lead, where we will support those planning or funding or design exercises of others, and those projects that we have in place that we need to continue. So the things that we're going to consider as we put this program together based on the priorities. What are those current commitments? What funding do we have available? What staffing we have available? What are the roles and commitments that other agencies have? If their plates are full, we don't want to engage in a project that's going to require a lot of their time if we cannot have access to that time. And then similarly, what are their schedules? So as we put the matrix together, there are 3 primary categories that we look at in terms of this methodology. What's the regional importance of the project? And projects are pretty broadly defined, from capital projects to planning projects, as was alluded to earlier. So for importance, we look at urgency. Is there great demand for that project right now? How large is it? The magnitude, whether it affects multiple nodes, since multimodalism is a broad goal of the organization. Does it have a regional impact, or is it more locally impactful? And then a new application was, what are those Title VI implications as the idea of equity is gaining ascendancy? Then we look at another category of action need. You know, is there a need for a plan? Does a plan exist? Is there need for funding, or does funding exist? That's kind of the scale we look at. And then how do we determine the role or whether Metro Plan should be involved? Typically, we want to be involved in projects that have a multi-agency aspect to them. We will step in where a project needs staffing, where an agency that might be the sponsor or the owner of the project doesn't have sufficient staff to pull it off. If there's funding opportunities, particularly grants that are out there associated or that could be affiliated with the project, and then whether it's a long-term need or not. Some of these further reaching projects that might be more exploratory or have a discovery nature to them may be a better fit for Metro Plan than some more immediate and concrete projects. So we went through the matrix. I'll be candid, we did not get a lot of feedback, but we did present this from individual agencies and putting this together, but we did get feedback from the TAC. And I think there's general support for this. And what I'm going to show on the next two slides are the rankings for the projects. We looked at about 80, scored them all. The things that you see in yellow are new projects or new aspects. So here's the Title VI column here, and a ranking that now accounts for that input. So just to kind of walk through the what you're seeing here, we have the list of the projects, have a general description that is no longer pending for most of these. So we have a description, and then there's categories that I talked about: regional importance, action need, and the Metro Plan involvement. These were, kind of scored by these broad categories, and then summed, and we have the rank based on that total. So you can see, ped bike projects come out on top, and I'm not going to walk through the various scores. You can look at those as I walk through these. The Downtown Mile project, in part because it's starting to hold up other funding streams and projects. A new project that really came on with a development that we'll talk about later, the relocation of FMC, really is putting attention or focus on the airport TI and its need for, or probable need for, expansion. The RTP still ranks high. Regional plan update ranks high. Another new project, the Milton City Circulation Plan. This really came to the fore as we worked with ADOT and other partners through the Milton Corridor Master Plan. That study did not directly speak to things like the baggage roads, Reardon Ranch Street, or Plaza on the west side. Really didn't look at city facilities for cross streets or pedestrian and bicycle facilities. But there is a general acknowledgement that if done well and in coordination, they can provide for a more robust or comprehensive treatment of that road. And so getting a circulation plan in place that developers can follow, as well as city investment can follow, would be useful. You see the Milton Connector Corridor Master Plan here. This is really a section from San Francisco to Lone Tree in the Sinclair Wash.
Dave,
Yes.
Pardon me for jumping in. This is Jeff. I wanted to point out that we really can't read the matrix because it's so small and there's a lot of information up there.
Oh, let me, thank you.
That goes to the highlights.
Is that a little more useful?
A little. Do you have a summary of from 80 projects being widowed, down?
Yeah. Let me, thank you. So let me just point out a couple more things and then we'll go to kind of the top 10 slide. Hopefully it's legible. I didn't realize.
Dave,
Yeah, I'm not sure that helped.
Dave, this is Jim Frankie. I'm gonna just interrupt real briefly. We don't have comments set up properly. So if someone on the board has a question, you may just have to interrupt at an appropriate time. Or Dave, you may want to stop every few minutes and say, are there questions? I did see a comment from Ms. Salas. Dave, has this been, I believe this has been emailed out in the packet. So I just point that out that so if somebody doesn't have it, I'm sure Dave would resend it. All right, go ahead, Dave. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So what we have on these two slides and are a fairly deep dive, if you will. The next slide, I've included, this is going, again, pretty deep down the list, but we did evaluate interstate pedestrian crossings. It ranked relatively low as an independent project, but I will remind you by going back up here that in this broader pedestrian bike ped projects, broadly speaking, are fairly important. And I think as we look at those projects, if these interstate crossings rank high amongst those, something that could receive attention. So the kind of the top 10 to zoom in on this, you can see here whether projects are in our strategic work program. The strategic work program, I'll note, does talk about just broadly bringing in additional funds to the region. So to the degree that some of these projects require funding, like pedestrian bike ped projects, that could be considered as part of our within the bounds of our strategic work program. You'll notice in looking at this that several of these projects, like the regional transportation plan is an obvious one, are already in our work program. They're underway. Others, MetroPlan helped secure a grant for ped bike projects. There's still more to be done there. MetroPlan helped submit a grant for smart signals. We're still working on the broader ITS strategy. So as I mentioned earlier, as we look at programming these and coming back to you with the program, we'll consider, are they in our strategic work program? Are they underway? Are one of our partners really already taking a lead in that? Some projects, like you see, planning for Route 8, transit route, may take place under an effort we'll talk about here momentarily under West Route 66. So some of these have the opportunity to be combined. Just have one more slide and then we will look to questions. So we hope to get some feedback today on priorities and your comfort with those. We'll take your comments into consideration and come back through the process and ultimately to the board in October, at the October 6th meeting, with a program that addresses these priorities. It'll be a multi-year program and it'll be used to inform our strategic work plan and unified planning work program going forward. So that concludes the presentation. At this time, I'll be happy to take any questions.
Or any board members?
I have a question.
Ronald?
Since we couldn't see the matrix and see which priorities are on there up close, What's the distribution in terms of, like, are the majority of these plans downtown, west side, kind of I-40, I-17 interchange? It's, I guess what I'm getting at is what's going on in terms of these priorities of these projects on the east side of town?
From a
In the
From a
center.
geographic distribution, considering the east side, just looking at this, most of this activity is focused on kind of the central Milton corridor and Lone Tree corridor and points west. Not a lot of east side priorities.
Okay. Dave, is there a reason for that?
I think the reason for that, Mr. Chair, is most of the development that's taking place, or a lot of it is surrounding NAU in the Milton corridor and in points west and kind of south central. So that's driving a lot of the demand and urgency components of this. A lot of the points further east, particularly within the city, are either relatively stable neighborhoods. They're not seeing a lot of redevelopment, and so not creating much in the way of new demand. Or, as you go further east, you're getting into, into the county and more, again, rural development, and that's not creating a lot of demand.
So I believe Mr. Melbeck had a comment next.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the question, Supervisor Vasquez. And I would add to what Dave said, the projects rise to the top based on the criteria and the scoring and how we measure them. We don't have a criteria for geographic distribution. And it's a really good point. Maybe we want one. This year, we added Title VI implications to address that increased focus. So we can look at those criteria.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think that would help at least, the urgency is going to rise to the top, obviously, and there's some areas that need to be tagged, but I think that way at least that's in the conversation, not overlooked. Because wise in the community, if all the construction are only seeing it on downtown corridor on the west side of town, then there's the perception that communities of color or poor communities aren't getting the same attention as those other areas. And so I just want to make sure that we're taking that into consideration as we're doing this matrix. Thank you.
Mr. Foley, and then Regina, did you have a comment too? We'll let Mr. Foley go first, and then Regina.
Yeah, I just wanted to understand a little bit more how the scoring takes place. What gives something a score of 1, 2, or 3, and obviously they all added up. And this is tiny. I can't see it. I just want to understand the metrics in principle.
Sure.
Jeff?
And I can address that, and Dave might want to correct or add some things to it. Essentially, though, and I don't know why that screen popped up. Essentially, we go through each one of these, and if something is urgent, it gets a high score. If it's not very urgent, it gets a low score. And
sorry, and the scores are,
1 to 5.
1 to 5. Okay.
Right. So highly urgent.
And so 5 is the highest score?
Yes.
Okay.
5 is the highest score, and it's also color coded in red. And we would go through each one of them, each one of these. So their action need is the next example. And I will say this matrix is in your packet if you have the PDF version that you can increase in size. But for funding need, let's say a project has absolutely no funding, that'll be 5. If the project's already
We have lost voice here, so some of us can't hear you.
I'm not hearing anybody either. I did hear you, Patrice.
Yeah, I'm hearing you, Austin, not them, so I don't know if they can hear us. Hello, anybody hear us there? Can somebody let us know whether,
Yeah, this is Dave. I'm in my office, not in the conference room. So I'm having the same problems you are.
can somebody let them know that we've lost the conference room?
I think, let me see if Rosie's in there. Hang on. They're aware and trying to
Okay.
address the problem.
Hello, everyone. We are obviously having technical difficulties. We lost the screen in the main conference room and the microphones. So we're just going to take a pause here. And if you just give us a few minutes and we'll try to get things all back online. Thank you.
That's fine. This is the era we live in.
Is that era or error?
You choose.
Both would work.
I do believe this era is just one big error.
Hey, Dave, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, just want to reverberate my request for you to share your entire presentation, because in the packet, it only has the two pages for your metrics. I really appreciate you sharing the entire presentation to the entire board. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, we should be all good to go.
Okay, can you hear us, folks? Councilmember Salas, I'm just going to ask you directly. Can you hear us in the conference room?
Yep, loud and clear.
Okay, thank you.
Our computer died, but we got it fixed again, apparently.
All right, Mr. Chairman, if I could perhaps paraphrase the question I heard from Dr. Foley and the answer I was going to give. So for those of you at home and calling in, the question was from Dr. Foley was to point out, are we in agreement on which projects are urgent and which projects have funding need and which don't, because a score is applied to each one of these. And the answer is, this is very subjective. And the way we try to get to agreement on it is we put this matrix together and we shared it with the technical advisory committee and asked for their input. And we shared it with the management committee and asked for their input. And it's here before the board. And there's a lot of detail here, of course, but the opportunity for someone to say, I don't think that's urgent at all, or I think it's incredibly urgent. But at the end of the day, it's a partner of science. This is not an empirical answer. Our efforts to filter 80 projects and say, where should we, the organization, focus our efforts?
Thank you. So just to add to that, the board can change if we think it's appropriate. It's already gone through the TAC and the management committee, but this board can change it. And, you know, we're open to discussion and suggestions. And then we're going to formally approve it next month. Is that correct?
That's correct. We discuss now when we bring it back for approval next month.
Yes. Yes, thank you. And then I said Virginia could be next. Virginia, Salas, go ahead. and then Aronima will be after that. You're muted, Virginia. Go ahead.
Yes, yeah, can you please share the slide that, that has the top 10 priorities? Slide 7.
Yeah, you're just gonna do that.
Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Yes. See. Okay. So what are the challenges on the projects that are highlighted in yellow?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Member Salas. Not that there are particular challenges, just that these were new to the list this year.
Okay.
And as far as if there are particular challenges with the airport TI, part of that is certainly coordination with ADOT. They have this a rehabilitation program or project in their program. And is quite a bit ahead of the hospital's schedule. And so trying to bring those two in alignment where we can perhaps do a coordinated effort similar to what was done on the 4th Street Bridge project over I-40. That's a challenge there. ADOT, I will say, is making some accommodations to support future widening in the work that they're doing. As far as the Milton City Circulation Plan, I think the Milton Corridor Master Plan, which is wrapping up, supports these types of efforts. And so if the city were to put together a plan with or without Metro Plan's assistance, it could dovetail very nicely with the Milton Corridor Master Plan. And so, it would be another planning effort. We would certainly pursue stakeholder input in the corridor, particularly from businesses, as we try to lay this out.
So is it accurate to observe that the hospital relocation as 89A is driving the need to speed up the airport TI?
Yeah, that is, Member Salas and members of the board, that is an accurate statement.
Thank you.
Mr. Vasquez?
Yeah, my question was, at first I was looking, so we're right, so everything else is gonna be taken off the list until next year, is that accurate? Or how does that work?
Jeff, you want to speak to that?
I do, Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Vasquez. Ideally, yes. The idea is to get us focused on the top 10 and we program them over 5 years, and every year we keep fine tuning. Clearly, if something pops up that's an emergency, an amazing opportunity, we're not locked in. And one of the advantages of being a relatively small organization is we can be agile. We can be strategic opportunists. There's an opportunity before us. But generally, the idea of this is just as you say, to keep us focused and moving forward in a positive way.
Okay, and so I appreciate that. Thank you. That clarifies some, and that's why I think your suggestion of geographication in the matrix is important, because then that can attempt to make that at least more equitable. Originally, when I was looking, I was thinking, okay, top 10 projects, we should really, if it comes out that 9 of the projects are all downtown and one's way out in Belmont or something, and there's nothing on the other side of town, maybe we need to consider looking at the region, looking to make sure that we have, however that region is broken up, quadrants, whatever, but we have a project addressing something in that region of the area. So that way people aren't feeling left out and all the focus is in one area. Especially if it's a 5-year, if we're talking about a 5-year plan. I mean, that's a concern to me that, we're talking major transportation, infrastructure that we're gonna be doing, that focusing on, and nothing's on the east side of town. You know, where's the input from over there? Has that been provided? How is that determined whether or not that's urgent? You know, like for the city downtown, it might not be urgent, but I guarantee you go on 6th Avenue, 7th Avenue right there, and there's some conversations to be had, you know, and so that's where my question comes from. And then finally, the other thing
Before
was,
you go on, I think Mr. Russell had a comment to that.
Sure.
And then we can come back to your second point.
Sure.
So Dave?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, Member Vasquez. So in addition to what Jeff had to offer, I will point out that there are some things, if you look on the columns on the right, like the data regional counting program and transportation modeling, those are things that are routine that we'll do. And so some things might move up into the top 10 that we can address. Other things may be of, you know, kind of under that strategic opportunity sort. They just, you know, somebody just simply needs a letter of support for one of these projects on our list, you know, from Metro Plan. And certainly, you know, those things will move into the list. So we want to focus on our highest priorities, but we'll also be providing support where it fits within our ability and doesn't detract from our other priorities.
no, thank you. I appreciate that. And I'm new to this board, so this is all fresh to me. So as I'm processing and digesting, I'm speaking out loud and asking my questions. So
That's good.
you know, the last point that I was gonna make was basically, as we go through and you assess the geographical importance of these different projects, you know, maybe if the board doesn't divide up the region or the whole metropolitan area into say quarters or something, maybe and try to get one project from each quarter on that top 10 priority list. Maybe as you're going through and seeing the geographic urgencies, like maybe you get a lot in a certain area, but not meeting the other criteria. We try to get one or two of those kind of projects on the top 10 list because of the fact that it's targeting an area that doesn't get the focus, that there's a need, we see there's a need in maybe not all of the matrix the way it is, but because of location. I mean, I can think of areas in Billy Park and, you know, some intersections over there that could also use some projects. And so I'm just thinking, you know, is there ways, like if we're doing our top 10, and I know the matrix is super important, are there ways to make sure that we're spreading out our work across the metro region, not just the downtown corridor or the 1740 corridor or whatnot? So thank you. I appreciate all your hard work, and that matrix is a bear.
Yeah, thank you. I just would, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, I just want to respond generally how much I appreciate the involvement of, you said you have a new perspective and that we're a new organization, we want to be a more robust and inclusive organization, and bringing in perspectives like that I might not be considering, or we might not be as tremendous. So thank you. And in direct response to that, I think we can map these projects geographically, and then that will be an overall filter. Here's what they scored, and then here's the geographic distribution. And so what do we now want to finalize? Again, it's going to be an art, not a science.
Yeah.
But it's a way to not be completely arbitrary.
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate that. And I think even if it turns out we map it out and they're after this, the top 10 doesn't include one on the east side, at least we did our due diligence and went through and looked at it and included that and had that conversation, you know, so that way when looking back, we say, okay, this year we did address it. We got to here, you know, the next year things might change, but at least that history's there of us having that conversation and making the strategic decisions with that included in the data set. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Good points. Ms. Salas, did you have another comment? I see your hands up.
Yes, I do, Mr. Chair, and thank you. Yeah, I really value and appreciate Supervisors Vasquez comments. I would recommend it for future agenda items is have a a brief report on the city's current and past, current, and future projects that are within the city limits through the Public Works or Streets Department. Just to give you an idea, like the city has some projects that the city funds and that may address the questions of Supervisor Vasquez, and also I appreciate the map that Mr. Malbec has suggested, but also include the projects that are managed by the city. That way, we will have like a complete, a more comprehensive overview on all the projects that's going on within the city, and of course, with the regional perspective of Metro plans. That way, we have the local and regional perspective of all our projects planned and accomplished and in the pipeline. Thank you.
All right, incidentally, it sounds like somebody has their speakers on, we're getting kind of some noise coming in. Could everyone please make sure that they have their speakers muted, except when they're talking, obviously. If we don't have any more questions on that, we'll move on to the next item.
Chairman,
Yes, Jesse, go ahead.
I do have one question. I know there's a list of projects, and also know that there's been quite a bit of flooding occurring in Flagstaff. Would it impact any of these projects? And if so, would any of these be reconsidered for maybe redesigning to deal with the flooding? That's my question.
All right, Jeff or Dave, yeah?
I'll start and then ask Dave for some more information, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Mr. Thompson, I don't believe that flooding is one of the criteria that we have used for these transportation projects. And I should also point out, we have taken an inventory of projects that all of our member agencies are doing, and then we're trying to prioritize them for how Metro Plan should be involved. So urgency with flooding projects might be really high on the score, this month. So that's how it would be considered. Beyond that, I don't think we're considering it in the matrix. Dave, do you have anything to add?
Yes, thank you, Jeff, Mr. Chair, Member Thompson. As to specific projects, as we mentioned in response to Member Vasquez, most of these projects are focused on kind of the central and west parts of town. I do not believe that any of the projects, and I may apply this to almost the whole list of 80 projects, and I obviously can't see all of them. Very few of those are in the area of the flooding. A lot of that flooding took place on the local streets. Our focus is on collectors and above, and most of our focus, I think, as appears in this list, is on those larger streets for minor arterials and major collectors. Short answer after a long answer is no, I don't believe any of these projects are directly aimed at the areas that receive the flooding.
Chairman, that's all I have, and thank you for the explanation as well.
Thank you, Mr. I think we're going to go on to item 3C now, which is architect funding projects priorities. So that's a Rural Transportation Advocacy Council, and we're going to be talking about the statewide initiative. So Jeff, could you help us on that one?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. These items really complement each other. And as some of you might know, just this morning I sent out something I rarely do, which is an updated staff report for this item, because we've been considering this project very carefully and because it's time sensitive. So I am going to put up on the screen the revised staff report that I just sent to folks this morning. I will say it's not significantly different. It doesn't really change the nature of the discussion. It just adds more information about a particular project. And I'm pleased to say that particular project might really address Supervisor Vasquez's concerns about geographic distribution. So with that as a background, let me take you to the staff report. I'm recommending that the board approve a project for pursuit of $2.6 million of state funding. Pursuit of $2.6 million. We don't have the money yet. Through the Rural Transportation Advocacy Council, which you'll hear me refer to as RTAC. And it's a statewide initiative. And just as a reminder, our related strategic work plan items, the board has directed staff to look for federal and state earmarks and to bring in at least $2 million of additional resources in this year. So by way of background, RTAC represents 10 small councils of governments. MetroPlan is one of those NPOs around the state. So councils of government like NACOG and NPOs like MetroPlan. And RTAC's mission is to represent these smaller organizations so that we have a rural transportation network. And advocacy is in the name of RTAC because that's what they do. They do a lot of work asking for funding and consideration. I want to point out that Kevin Adam is the executive director of RTAC, and he is actually in the virtual room today. And I'd like to point out that Councilmember Salas serves on the RTAC board, and Supervisor Vasquez serves as an alternate on the RTAC board. And actually both members, Salas and Vasquez, have been very involved in RTAC activities in recent months. So this year, RTAC has a new funding initiative. And I think it has potentially tremendous benefit for MetroPlan. And RTAC is pursuing a $50 million funding initiative to take directly to the governor and the state legislature as a special budget appropriation. I need to be really clear for ADOT in particular that we're not looking to peel money away from ADOT that's already been appropriated. We're looking for additional money from the state budget surplus. Now, one of the big benefits of this approach is that MetroPlan will be working with essentially 9 other councils of government and small NPOs around the state. So instead of just one voice going forward and asking for money, we're all going forward and saying, through RTAC, can you represent us and do something for greater Arizona? And that's good because we're partnering with people and hopefully have more momentum. I need to point out that we can also continue to ask for funding on our own. And as a reminder, this past year, Councilmember Salas wrote a letter to Senator Rogers and worked closely with Representative Blackman to request $5 million for a project in Flagstaff. That wasn't awarded to us, but it's something we can still do. So my point is it's little risk. We can work with everybody and we can do our own thing. And I feel like it's a good solution. Now, RTAC is putting together the full package and coordinating 10 other organizations, and they've asked each organization to provide a project priority. And we, as you know, are going through our project priority matrix. We just did. And we're, as Councilmember McCarthy pointed out, we're going to ask you to adopt it next month. But right now we've got a time frame, and RTAC really wants a priority from us. So I'm going to ask the board to consider a priority today. And I'm going to give you some more information that hopefully bring you to the decision point. As we look at the matrix that was just developed, bicycle and pedestrian funding scored top. Also, last year, bicycle and pedestrian funding was a top priority. And we all know about the recent safety issues and the bicycle accident in Flagstaff. So it's a very compelling issue locally. That said, there's another consideration which is we want the project, the funding to be successful. And arguably, putting forward projects that the state likes, and in some ways, road projects are more popular with the state than alternative road transportation projects. We might want to put forward the Lone Tree Corridor, because it's a road project, there's a lot of momentum behind it. And it's very tangible to the state. So I want to point out really a final consideration is if we can, overall, the state's going to be considering a $50 million funding request. And arguably, one bicycle and pedestrian project, 5% of the total request might not be a deal breaker, even if the state legislature doesn't love bike and ped projects. Even so, it will be important for us to make the safety case to our representatives, Representative Blackman in particular, that we can build support at the state level. And I want to let you know that we discussed this at length with the TAC and the management committee. And we landed after about an hour discussion of priorities on the Lone Tree Corridor for the reasons mentioned. It's got momentum, there's local funding available, and it's regionally significant. However, since the TAC meeting, we've had further discussions, and the idea of moving funding to bicycle and pedestrian projects came up. So what I want to share with you are two alternatives, and then actually three, but then open it up for discussion. The first alternative is for the board to approve bicycle and pedestrian projects as a priority for us. The reasons would be it scores highly on Metro Plan's matrix. We know about the demand, and there would be flexibility in how Metro Plan could apply the funds. And based on the last item and the comments, the discussion that Supervisor Vasquez brought up, this actually means if Metro Plan received the funding, we could move bicycle and pedestrian funding to projects in the county, projects on NAU, projects that benefit Mountain Line. It wouldn't be funding that just went straight to one member agency. That's a really unique approach to use bicycle and pedestrian funding. The other kind of tried and true and simple basic approach is move it into the Lone Tree Corridor for the reasons we mentioned. If that happened, it resonates with the state, but the issue is when we look at our project priority matrix, that project for us, Metro Plan scores 77 out of 80. So, it begs the question, why would we put money into something that's a low priority for us? I mean, it has funding, the city already has funded it. And then the other option, of course, is to make a decision in October. But I'm asking you to make a decision today because we want to stay on track and support our TAC and the overall statewide initiative. And I feel that we're safe doing either of these alternatives. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. And I'd like to have some discussion about the pros and cons of each alternative. Mr. Chairman.
So Jeff, it sounds like maybe we'll have some discussion about this and then maybe go around and ask board members which of the two ideas they would prefer to pursue. Does that make sense?
That sounds great. Thank you.
All right. So do we have any just general comments before we, or questions before we take a position? Anybody out there? Anybody here in the room? Mr. Kohler?
So I just wanted to get, I can't prove that, probably the scope of the bicycle pedestrian project, what that entails.
So specifically, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Okay, Jeff?
Yes, Dr. Coley, members of the board, there are a number of bicycle and pedestrian projects the funding can be applied to. At this point, I don't have anything exactly that we would say we're going to build. We would point to, I think, the $50 million of projects that the city has quantified. I know Supervisor Vasquez has expressed interest in developing a trail network from the Donut Park area. And we would need to work with NAU if you've got some priority projects that we might want.
Thank you. Any other general questions on this? So if it makes sense, I think I'll just go around and one by one and ask the board members what their thoughts are. Patrice Horstman, should we start with you?
Well, I would go with alternative. And it's really obviously a hard one, but I think alternative 2, I think that is certainly the most viable, and that would be my recommendation.
Okay.
I second that.
That's my inclination as well. I like number 1 and I really want that to be a priority. However, the fact that it might not resonate well with the state legislature is a concern as a road project. And so if number 2, I know it's going against the matrix and we're using the matrix to prioritize stuff. But it sounds like if this is something that we can really punch through, then we might as well take advantage of it, knowing that in the future, we're probably not going to fund or pursue a project at 77 out of 80. It's just this kind of unique circumstance that this might get us over the hump with that major project. So yeah, I'll go with number 2.
All right, which is the Lone Tree.
Or Lone Tree. Yes.
So, Mr. Oslin, did I hear you're a Lone Tree?
Did you hear my what?
Are you in support of the Lone Tree alternative, option 2? As opposed to Bike and Ped?
Austin, he didn't hear you. We're having a hard time hearing you in the conference room, just so you're aware. And he wanted to know what alternative, and I believe you also said 2, and obviously he didn't hear you when you said that, Austin.
Yeah. Thank you, Patrice.
All right, Mr. Foley?
Yeah, as much as I like option 1, and I think it's a project that will continue to get traction in the future, I'll take advantage of the moment and do option 2.
Okay, Regina Salas?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am gravitating toward option 2. With because we're looking at a 2.6 million. I wonder if the 2 million goes to the Lone Tree corridor and the 600,000 goes to the bike ped project.
Mr. Miller?
I'm sorry, I was admitting somebody to the room. Could you please ask that question again, Councilmember Salas?
Okay, if we're looking to receive 2.6 million through the RTAC state funding initiative, can we split that to first prioritizing the Lone Tree corridor and obligate 2 million, and then the 600 will be obligated to bicycle and pedestrian project? Can we split that 2.6 million into the 2 projects?
Yes, Councilmember Salas and members of the board, I believe that we can do that. We can put the money in whichever way we like.
So
That's my suggestion. 2 million to Lone Tree corridor and 600,000 to bike and ped projects.
okay, so both. So I'll go back around, but Mr. Thompson, could you comment on either alternatives 1, 2, or the Salas alternative?
Let's see what happens. I'll go with Mr. Salas's recommendation.
Okay. So I'll go back around. Patrice, what do you like her idea, or would you rather?
I mean, I think it's a great idea. I think 1 and 2 they're hard decisions, right? I mean, of course, we love the bike and pedestrian projects, but I'm also a bit of a realist here. And so what I want to be able to do is be able to have an alternative that's going to move forward and that we're going to get past the finish line. And I guess I'd like to hear from Jeff whether he thinks that trying to split the money up is going to slow this down or affect one or both projects.
Chair McCarthy and Supervisor Horstman, I actually am going to, Kevin Adams is on the line, and he's executive director for RTAC. Can you hear me okay, Supervisor Horstman?
Yeah, but it's really a struggle, guys. I'm sorry. Next time I'll try to be there in person. It just didn't work, and I don't like our numbers here in Coconino County, but it is a struggle to hear y'all.
All right, well, we'll look at how we organize the meetings in the future. I'd like to see if Kevin Adam, who's the executive director of RTAC, could address that question.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay,
you're coming through very nicely.
We do hear
terrific.
you great.
Okay. Great. Okay, I think that, first off, you need to remember RTAC is pushing this proposal through as a compromise and an alternative to the earmarking that the state legislature has done. And I think that what we're going to provide them a specific list of projects, like would happen with an earmarking process. But at the same time, we're doing it in a way that all of these projects have been vetted and prioritized by all the transportation planning organizations, including Metro Plan. And so my plan and hope is to stay consistent and true to that vetting process that you're doing. So if you propose that it's these two projects that come out on top and the priority to pursue, I'm certainly comfortable inserting that into our legislation and pursuing it. The one concern or question that I would have is the timing, because what I don't think we want to see is for projects to get earmarked and then they just basically sit on the books because all of the needed funding isn't available and construction is delayed. I think there needs to be a priority on being able to complete or significantly have construction underway in all these projects in FY23. So provided that can be accomplished with the selection of the two projects and the funding that would be provided to the two, then I certainly don't have a problem with selecting two projects.
All right, so Ms. Horstman,
Well, with that, I want to hear from Jeff as to whether he thinks we can go forward with these two projects.
Okay. Thank you for the question. My recommendation is to stick with the two alternatives here and alternative number 2 rather than hybrid. And I think I can address Councilmember Salas's concern with that. If we are successful in getting this funding, the 2.6 million that comes in, we can direct towards the Lone Tree Corridor, which arguably, and I cannot commit this, I want to be really clear, this require more discussion with the city. But arguably, if Metro Plan brought in 2.6 million for the Lone Tree Corridor, we could work with the city to free up some of the money that's freed up to be moved towards bicycle and pedestrian projects. And while I can't commit to that, and I know I'm just throwing it out as an idea, it keeps our request now very clean on one project that is probably the most likely to be supported by the state.
Okay. Then you've answered my question very much. Thank you, Jeff. And I appreciate the background information from Kevin as well. So I will stick, sorry, Regina, but I'm going to go with 2. So like the idea, but I think I want to go with what's practical and what we can do. So I'm going with 2.
so Mr. Wessel, did you have a quick comment?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. And in response to Kevin's point about obligating these funds by FY23, the city is underway on the Lone Tree overpass. And so it would certainly fit both the Lone Tree Corridor criteria or definition as well as Kevin's, our tax hope that we spend this money soon and still fits in with Jeff's point about being able to free up money elsewhere. I just wanted to bring that out. Other aspects of the Lone Tree Corridor may not be online by fiscal year 23.
Can I add something? Jeff, I appreciate the way that you described this. What I see here, what I trust is going to happen with MetroPlan is that you're not taking your eye off of the ball of alternative number one, but leveraging alternative two to better effectuate the other goals that we have. I see this as a both and not an either or, even though it's not a hybrid approach. It's not a zero-sum game either. I think I like that the way this is being framed is that this is the strategic way to appropriately leverage our desires for full bicycle and pedestrian projects in tandem with the practical achievable goals we're on the cusp of realizing.
Okay, I'm liking to think that we're coming to a consensus that we should pursue the Lone Tree, that we're definitely going to keep bicycle and ped in the back of our mind for future things. Regina, did you want to make a quick comment? We didn't kind of move on. We're kind of.
Yeah, well, just if I can just make a
Wow.
last statement. Yeah, I just appreciate the discussion, and I was just putting the pedal to the metal, just advocating for our bike and pedestrian projects, and also keeping in mind that that's one of the city's values as well. But yeah, I can stick with the Lone Tree Corridor. It will be fully supported by the state. Plus, it's a voter approved, and we have city matching funds. Thank you.
All right, so I think we have a consensus that we're going to move forward with the Lone Tree Corridor, that we're certainly not going to forget about bike and peds. So I think I'll move on to the next item. And this one is with Jeff again. It's a mini grant program.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, we do have a lot more on the agenda, and we have two groups of guest speakers for upcoming items. So I'm going to move through this as quickly as I can. Let me push it up to the screen. And I'm recommending that the board consider and adopt criteria for a mini grant to member agencies of up to $210,000. This is directly out of our strategic work plan to continue the mini grant program and award it within the next 4 months. And this is the background briefly is that historically MetroPlan has passed through funding. Last year we passed through $50,000. This year we have the opportunity to pass through up to $210,000. And we want to be in a position to support our member agencies who have projects they're trying to complete. We had support from the technical advisory committee and the management committee to approve this project. And I just want to point out some of the alternatives so that you know. And I want to point out we have the money budgeted already. We're anticipating doing this. You can approve this approach just as it's been lined out and approved by the TAC. You can make some changes to it if you want to, such as add a geographical distribution criteria if you like. You could, and item number 3 gets confusing. I'm just going to jump to the chase and say I'm not recommending we distribute to nonprofit groups. It gets very complicated, and I think keeping it as we have, we award only to member agencies. If you have questions about that, we can go into it. And then you could choose to not approve this grant at all. And MetroPlan could use the money in other ways. But I'm recommending really that we approve it and send it to people because it's been supported and it's in our strategic work plan.
So do any of the board members have any comments? Do we need a formal motion or just do it by consensus? I think.
I would appreciate a formal motion, and I would put the motion up on the.
All right, any comments, or would someone like to make a motion to approve one of the alternatives? And alternative one is basically approving as putting in the packet. Okay, who wants to speak to this?
I move that we accept alternative number 1.
I'll second.
So we have a motion by Ms. Horstman and a second by Mr. Vasquez. Any discussion? And this is for Jeff, for alternate 1. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you. Are there any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously with to approve alternative number 1. All right, so we'll move down to item E. And Dave Russell is going to talk to us about the West Route 66 planning process. Dave?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. In our strategic work plan, we have the West Route 66 planning process to be initiated by the end of this calendar year. And we're looking for support from the board to initiate that process with a budget of $100,000. There's several things that we hope to achieve under the scope of this project. One of the key ones, some of the key ones would be, the number of lanes that are required across the full length of the project. As you know, we have considerable development taking place or proposed in the corridor. Another would be looking at the transit needs in the corridor, including the pedestrian connections, stop locations and pedestrian connections to those. And then another is understanding the impacts to the interstate system, particularly I-40 at the west end as 66 improves. Are we diverting traffic to and from I-40, and are there any implications for that? Some of the things, we want to apply to a lot of the lessons that we learned from the Milton Corridor Master Plan, one of which is really having a robust public participation process involved in that. And so we'd be looking to apply that. As we look at some of the alternatives that we explored, we did talk with Mountain Line about trying to bring additional funds into this project. As we looked at the machinations for how that would happen, we just came to a mutual agreement that that wasn't really particularly practical. Another thing that we may do and may propose, I'll let Jeff perhaps speak to this briefly, is do we look at shifting funds from that mitigant grant program? The motion you just made was to provide funds up to $210,000. Do we feel like to get the full scope of activities for the 66, we increase the budget there? So I'll, in the interest of time, I'll stop there, see if there's any questions. Mr. Chair.
Jeff, can you scroll up to the recommended action? Does that make sense at this point?
Yes, it's a recommending.
Okay, oh, there it is. Okay, thank you. Do we have any discussion on this item? Or a motion?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Just-
Mr. Cole.
Yeah, just for my clarification, what is the extent of West Route 66? Where does this stop? Where does it end? What's the scope?
Dr. Crowley, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, our scope is from Woodlands Boulevard to I-40. So it's west of the Home Depot.
Oh. Thank you.
Any other comments or a motion?
Motion that we approve it.
Mr. Chair,
Well, okay, Mr. Vasquez moved to approve
yeah.
the effort, starting the effort and authorizing $100,000. Mr. Foley seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing-
No. I vote yes.
So no, you vote yes. Okay. I like that.
Well, you asked if there was any further discussion. It's no, and I vote yes on the motion.
I understand that, but it was kind of humorous. Okay, all those in favor, and we already have Patrice's vote, say aye, and I say aye.
All right.
Aye.
Aye.
Do we have any nays? All right, that recommendation passes without dissent. Thank you so much. Moving on to item F, and this is Mr. Novak is going to have a brief discussion, considering where we are on time, about how to resolve issues between member agencies.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to recommend we table this to next month. It doesn't have to be addressed today, and we do have people on deck in the room.
And I think that's a good idea. Unless there's any objection, we will skip it out for now. And I do recommend that the members read the packet. I read through it. And it wasn't. All right, so we're going to move on to item G. And this is Mr. Malbeck again. He's going to talk about the regional transportation plan update and where we are in that process.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, and everyone on the phone, just another reminder to, if you could, turn your speaker off, mute the microphone if needed to prevent feedback if you're not speaking. And this item is for discussion only. I want to point out that David Wessel has been doing this work with this organization over 20 years. He's done about 5 of these plans in his career. And this is a 25-year plan that we update every 5 years. Dave is the project manager who's managing Burgess and Knifel, who's the contractor. And as you'll recall, we did a national search and reviewed the contract with the Regional Transportation Plan Advisory Group, the Transportation Advisory Committee. It was a very long process to bring Burgess and Knifel on board. And I want to say I am very satisfied with the work that Dana and her team are doing. In my career, I've worked with a lot of consultants, and frankly, you might not be surprised to know I had some management issues in the past. And so far, I just want to say this is one of the best experiences of my career, and I'm very enthusiastic that we're going to be successful. I asked Dana to provide an overview of the regional transportation plan and introduce herself and her team. And before doing that, I do just want to
Things have locked up on this end.
Yeah, I don't hear him anymore. It seems to be frozen. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Patrice. I'm gonna go see what's going on.
All right, thanks.
Rosie's on point here. She's taking care of it.
Thank you.
Interesting. So you can talk with me.
Oh, you're,
I'm on the phone.
okay, hello, everybody. This is Jeff Mileback. Internet went down in our headquarters. So we have lost our connection and we're trying to get reconnected. I'm speaking to you from Rosie's cell phone and we'll be back with you as soon as we can.
Let me try the other internet.
Let me ask Councilmember Salas, are you able to hear me over the cell phone?
Yes, I do, loud and clear.
We hear you here too, Jeff.
Okay, then I'm gonna get back to what I was doing with my introduction and say that one of the key issues that we're wrestling with, and I just want to give you an overview. I'm not asking this board to delve into this issue today. However, one of the questions that's come up that we're discussing with the advisory group is how the regional transportation plan considers the carbon neutrality plan and how these blend together. But in the interest of time, in the thorniness of that issue, I'm going to go to what I said I would do and simply introduce Dana, and she's going to, I believe, take over the screen and do a brief overview. Dana, are you ready to do that?
Yes, let me know when you can see my screen.
Yes, I can see your screen.
Okay, great. Well, thanks everyone for having me here today. We're really excited to be working with MetroPlan on this RTP. And just to give a sort of a project flow, and Jeff, I don't know if you want to describe this or if you'd like for me to, or if you're able to see it. All right. So basically there are multiple parties involved in the plan development. So there is an advisory group and a TAC, and they provide input to Jeff, who then turns to provide input to Dave and all of MetroPlan. And then we take that input and then process any input received and bring it back to this group, the advisory committee and the TAC. So just a general overview about some of the elements about this RTP. So we are, unlike many traditional RTPs, we're not necessarily looking to start from scratch and develop a list of projects. Transportation infrastructure funding has already been established, as well as needs through Prop 419 and 420. So we're developing more of a policy-based RTP. We're going to be looking at two scenarios, one which focuses on the current land use plan, as well as the projects identified through 419 and 420. This scenario essentially would meet the requirements or the federal planning requirements for an RTP. And we would look for opportunities to enhance sustainability within the scenario, but again, looking at the current likely future based on all the mechanisms that are in place. In support of sustainability and carbon neutrality, we're going to be developing a second scenario that has more latitude with a sustainability focus. So changes could include things like a different strategy for future land use, modifications or new projects from 419 and 420. And basically, we'll be seeking public engagement and input from other planning partners and planning efforts to help frame maybe what could be one desired mechanism to achieve the sustainability goals established. And that's what we'll vet in scenario 2. So it certainly wouldn't be the only way that it could be done, but it would be, again, informed by the public and stakeholders as to what could be a desirable way to get there, and see what it would take. Essentially, it does provide an opportunity to see exactly what it might take to achieve the goals of the carbon neutrality plan. So we have 7 tasks, and in the spirit of brevity, I'll just move to the little details on each. So task 1 is basically administration. So we'll have, the kickoff and project management meetings, ongoing project engagement and management activities, working with, again, all of the stakeholders we've already mentioned, and as well as a public involvement element. And there was a draft work plan with a schedule and other items prepared already. Task 2 will be looking at the current socioeconomic and transportation conditions. So this is kind of a two-step process. We're conducting a literature review and looking at different strategies so to the identification of what strategies have or have not been well received in other geographies, again, solely for an informative purpose. We're also looking at changes related to COVID-19. So things that we're familiar with are the increase in work from home, the Amazon effect, different changes to our lives and what would be the potential lasting impacts. And then we'll develop a trend analysis based on this information as well as socioeconomic data. So with the socioeconomic data, we'll be looking at additionally accessibility for Title VI populations compared to basically general population of Flagstaff, and would include a cross-reference to second home residents. So task 2 would basically conclude with the literature review and relevant trends report.
Yeah, quick question, if you could go back to the slide, just the nomenclature on there, what's VMT stand for and what does WFH stand for, please?
I apologize. VMT is vehicle miles traveled and WFH is work from home.
Great, thank you, I appreciate it.
Yes, I apologize.
No problem, go ahead.
Task 3 is validation and update of the travel demand model. This is a pretty technical topic. If anybody wants more information, we're able to provide that. Just let me know, but basically we'll be calibrating the model and updating it. Task 4 is, again, development of these two scenarios. So again, both scenarios would have considerations for things like land use, projected project costs for infrastructure, recommendations for programming sequence, considerations for life cycle costs like operation and maintenance. And then we will be developing performance metrics and evaluating how well each of these scenarios performs. So for example, a performance metric could be vehicle miles traveled, with the idea of maintaining 2019 levels. So scenario 1 would show you with the increase in population, approximately what the VMT could be. Scenario 2 would show you with changes to enhance sustainability, what could potentially be obtained, or again, what you would need to do to maintain those 2019 levels. Greenhouse gas emissions and other factors could be considered as part of the performance metrics. Task 5 is the public engagement. So we are working with a branding firm to come up with essentially branding to help promote awareness of MetroPlan. We'll be using social media for engagement, other online sources. We're conducting a statistically valid survey to inform the and values of the region. This will be conducted in November. And then we'll also have in-person outreach, likely in the springtime. In engagement with the advisory committee, it was expressed the importance of that in-person engagement. And those events would likely target populations that are typically less likely to participate in transportation planning processes. Task 6 is developing the plan. So again, we're going to make this more of a public-facing plan, heavy on graphics that the average person can understand. And it would help, again, kind of, this is the path we're on. This is, with the scenario 1, this is the path we are currently on. And this is an alternative future that achieves many of the goals of our region. And then just would help identify policies to help implement some of those changes. And again, would tie back to other policy documents and city and county policies. And again, the plan is seeking to identify what it means to be the finest transportation system in the country. Task 7, and I've touched on this briefly with the Title VI and our outreach focused on those groups. We would be looking at an equity analysis and then accessibility for those Title VI populations to access things like jobs, medical services, groceries, recreation, and education. And we'll do this iteratively. So we'll at scenario 1, and then as part of our enhancements for scenario 2, if there are areas that maybe lack connectivity for some of those populations, identify some additional projects to provide better connectivity for those residents. This is our overall schedule. As you can see, we anticipate having the final plan completed in October 22, with various other deliverables along the way, including those that I touched on, the work plan, lit review, existing land use, and the scenario comparison. And you can see we'll be working on scenario 1, which leverages the existing land use and planned transportation improvements from January to April, which would then again be able to leverage the information gleaned from the statistically valid survey, and then the enhanced sustainability scenario from May through July. And as I've mentioned, we've been engaging with multiple groups and other planning processes. We've completed the work plan, we're working on the literature reviews, and we're working through data collection. We anticipate stakeholder outreach activities next month, again with a statistically valid survey in November. So are there any questions or comments?
Well, this is Jim McCarthy. I'll point out that Metro Plan will send out a copy of this presentation to all the board members. And if anybody else on the call is interested, I'm sure if you send an email to Jeff that he would get you one also. Are there any other questions or comments from the board members? Mr. Acoli, please.
Presentation.
Could you hear Mr. Acoli's comment?
Not very well.
He said it was a great presentation.
Oh, great. Well, I'm glad I heard that. Thank you.
Mr. Vasquez seconds it, and I third it.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah. All right, well, thank you so much. We will be talking again, I am sure.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Dana. I really appreciate your input. So we're going to move on to Northern Arizona Healthcare relocation. And Jeff, I think you had some comments on this, just for discussion only. Thank you again, Dana.
It is, Mr. Chairman, if you'll just give me a minute here. Okay, I've put the staff report, which is very brief, up on the screen. I'm going to introduce Stephen Ice with Northern Arizona Healthcare, and just let the board know that I met with Steve and his team, Dave Wessel and I did a couple of weeks ago, to talk about how Metro Plan might be involved in, be able to support the major effort that's happening with Northern Arizona Healthcare. And I know that Steve and Ice have spoken with a number of people in the room. It just felt like a good opportunity here at this board meeting to give him some time and to give the board some time in this public meeting to share some information, maybe ask some questions, and keep an ongoing dialogue. It's obviously a very significant project, not only at the transportation level, and it definitely is significant at a transportation level, but it's for the entire community. It's a very big project. So with that, I really appreciate the work you're doing, Mr. Ice, and I turn it over to you.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate the time, and thank you to the board for having me. As Jeff stated, I think the intention today is for this to be fairly informal. I have had an opportunity to meet with most of you at some level in other areas that you do business. So I hope some of what I'm bringing isn't very new information. I don't plan on giving the entire presentation that we've planned on giving in the past, and thought we'd just kind of focus more on our overall graphic that explains the development, and then open this up as an opportunity for anyone from the board or anyone else attending the meeting to be able to ask us any questions as it relates specifically to the development and transportation. So I'm going to can you all see that image?
Yes, you can.
Okay, perfect. So just a little bit about the development itself, a little bit about where we're at from a design perspective. We have what you see highlighted in that colored area is approximately 188 acres of land that Northern Arizona Healthcare acquired over the last 18 months or so. We actually just closed on the last parcel of land here about 2 months ago. So NAH has a vision that we're calling the NAH Health Village. That vision is kind of two pieces or two projects in one. And I'll draw your attention to the larger purple building that's kind of in the center of the development. Just maybe to take a step back quickly for those who don't know where this is. You'll see the I-17 located about a third of the way up on the screen. That's south side of I-17 on the left, north being on the right. Just off screen to the left or south of this development, about a quarter of a mile would be the J.W. Powell interchange. And just off screen to the right of this image is the Mountain Dell, University Heights neighborhoods, and then ultimately Lake Mary Road, where 89A and Beulah connect into that area. So that purple building, as I was saying earlier, is the actual relocation of Flagstaff Medical Center. So the intention of this development would be to build a full 300-bed replacement hospital for Flagstaff Medical Center that's currently in the northern part of downtown. And then on the south end of that purple structure to build an approximately 150,000 square foot ambulatory care center. And that ambulatory care center would be an effort to co-locate all of Northern Arizona Healthcare's outpatient services that we currently provide all over the city, to include primary care offices, specialty care offices, outpatient imaging, and an outpatient ambulatory surgery center. Kind of a one-stop shop for residents of Flagstaff and Northern Arizona to be able to get all their outpatient care needs, lab, pharmacy, imaging, all rolled up into one convenient visit for them. So that is the kind of 50 acres of self-developed land that NAH is developing and funding themselves. What you see around the development itself is the rest of what we are calling this health village concept. The concept itself really is born on the fact of trying to flip what the current healthcare model is of sick care to a true health and wellness concept moving forward. So we intend on having third-party development partnerships with health-focused retail restaurants, along with some research and innovation partners that will not only be job creators for Northern Arizona and the city of Flagstaff, but also bring some technology-focused research to Northern Arizona Healthcare as we continue to try and leverage technology in the future to care for patients. And then a few site amenities to round out that health village. One or two hotels, depending on what that looks like from a pro forma perspective. About 60% of our patients come from outside of Flagstaff proper. And we have quite a few patrons who come in from out of town who could use that hotel amenity during some of their extended stays. And then also about 177 residential units are currently being planned right now, along with potential conference center, And then that kind of retail and restaurant piece that you see in the orange and red. So that other 130 or so acres is intended to be third-party development on land that will be retained by Northern Arizona Healthcare. And we are purposefully retaining all that land so that we could truly drive who our partners are and drive that health vision. From a timing perspective, we submitted our zoning application to the city of Flagstaff the last week of April of this year. Since that time, we have been out meeting with community members, such as yourself. We've met with all members of city council to go through our plan, and just about to kick off a more formal traffic impact analysis. We did some higher level, not very detailed traffic impact analysis in our first review. The city has specifically asked us to wait until NAU is back in session to get a more accurate picture of what traffic looked like within the city. So we're kicking that traffic impact analysis off in about 2 weeks with a planned completion and report ready to be issued by the end of October. And then we'll be back with the city and hopefully into a planning and zoning meeting later this year, and then ultimately city council approval in early 2022. If that all goes well, we would be beginning construction in about September of 22, with a planned completion of the ambulatory care center in early 24 and a hospital completion in late 26. So at this time, I'll open it up to any questions that the group might have.
I have a question about the emergency services, because at first, my understanding after the first presentation to the Board of Supervisors was that emergency services would be in the new complex, but then I heard that they was going to stay at the current space. So what's the plan for the emergency room?
Yeah, emergency services will be relocated to the new campus. We are growing our emergency department by about 8 rooms, and will continue to serve as the only level 1 trauma facility for Northern Arizona.
And with that considered, has there been an impact study done on like the 17 for the eastern kind of outward parts, where now the 17, getting on the 17 is going to be the quickest way to get to the hospital?
Yeah, so some of those eastbound points of the 17 and also the 40 heading east are part of the traffic impact analysis we will be conducting this month.
All right, thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? I guess I'll make a quick comment. It does seem that I-17 is a big roadblock getting to the hospital. I kind of wonder if we could, add an extra exit right there. It would only go to the hospital, or then that might be completely impractical, but I am a little concerned about it's a little difficult to get to this hospital because I-17 is right in the way.
Yeah, and we had our Dawn Cartier from CivTech, who is our traffic engineer, had looked at that, and I'll have to follow back up with you, Councilman, in more detail that I can get from her as to why that new exit off the 17 actually didn't work. They've done some pretty thorough analysis on how to get to the site via the 40 and 17, and it does split the traffic about almost 50-50 in the north-south direction. But we do actually think we have proper accessibility off the freeway coming from every direction. But I could prepare a little more information for you specifically around that and get it over to you.
Okay, and then I presume that will be in the traffic analysis.
It will.
Julian Wolf has a comment?
Yes, thank you, Chair McCarthy. This is Julian Wolf from Supervisor Horstman's office, and I apologize that Supervisor Horstman had to attend an emergency. So I'm here on her behalf. Steve, can you enlighten us a little bit about what the plans are for the current location of the hospital with that land?
So we are ultimately thinking of redevelopment for the existing campus. We have not finalized on what that redevelopment looks like, because that development could be out 8-9 years from now with the closure of Flagstaff Medical Center from a healthcare perspective being not until 2027. But our initial first pass at what redevelopment could look like did lend itself towards something that could be some high density housing. If at that time, in the 2028, 2029 timeframe, we were still in a situation like we're in now, where we needed some level of high density housing. We've looked at a few options where part of the bed tower could be redeveloped into high density housing, and then other parts of the redevelopment could be something more on the lines of recreation space, also retail and restaurant. We have a fairly unique site here in that we have about 660,000 square feet of building. So probably far too much building to just turn into housing. But with that, we also have a very adequate amount of parking as well as electrical and water infrastructure from a redevelopment perspective. So we feel it could be a great kind of organic urban redevelopment project in the future that might stave off other new development in the city that wouldn't be a redevelopment project like ours.
And when you say redevelopment, is that something that NAH would take on, or would you sell the land and look for a developer?
Yeah, I don't think we know the answer to that yet. I would say, depending on what it leans towards, if it becomes a housing redevelopment, we would probably look for a partner in that redevelopment. We are not truly in the development business, right? We are in the healthcare business, and that's why we've chosen to only do the healthcare or hospital and ambulatory care center development of the new campus, and we'll look to third-party development for what's around us. But I think with us being owners of the building and land, it does give us the ability to make sure that it's a redevelopment that NAH and the city of Flagstaff are in agreement on will bring benefit to the community.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions or comments? Well, thank you for coming, and I know you're doing a lot of community outreach, so we do appreciate that. I think we're going to move on to item I, which is items from the executive director. Jeff?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I do have a few items. The first one is, please send email feedback directly to Rosie as soon as you can after this meeting about any difficulties you experience with today's meeting and what you need. I have my own notes, Rosie has her notes, but anything you want to share would just help us make the meeting go better next time. And I really do want to thank you for your patience as we work through the many bugs. I want to share, since we seem to have a few minutes, my name. You may have noticed that I went Jeff Miles back, and the reasons for that. And I want you to know, I'm really tired of living in the shadow of Jeff Bowman, the city traffic engineer. There's so much confusion between which Jeff are we talking about. And actually, I'm reclaiming a name I used in my 20s when I was a park ranger. People actually assume that Miles is derived from my last name, Mileback, but it's actually short for vehicle miles traveled. Boom. I got to work on my delivery on that joke. Seriously though, I respond to Jeff or Miles, whichever you want to use. Frankly, with board members, I respond to hey you. And I've been Jeff in the community for a long time, and Miles is a shift that some people are taking on, and I just wanted to explain that to you. The other thing that I put in my staff report is, and very briefly, the RAISE grant, Rebuilding American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity. That's an over $3 million grant that was submitted. It's in your staff report. Dave submitted a ATC MTD grant. I would say what that stands for, but we don't have time. It's a very long grant name. And thank you, Dave, for all your work. The Milton Corridor, we expect ADOT to provide their plan by the end of this week, actually. So we'll be bringing that to you next month. And to let you know, the transportation planner entry-level position is opened and on the street, and we hope to fill it soon. And I can go into more detail if you like. I know we've got a few minutes left, but I'd like to just turn it back to you, Mr. Chairman, in case there are other items you want to address.
We're going to try to end it on time. So why don't we do items to and from the board? And I'll just start and kind of jump to the next one. And our next meeting is October 6th at 10 o'clock. So let's just go around. Patrice Horstman is gone. Did her representative have any comments, or Julian?
I'll be attending for Supervisor Horseman on her behalf while she is gone.
Okay, so you'll be at the next meeting.
Yes.
Okay, Geronimo?
I just appreciate the conversation today and really, want to look at that geographic equity and accessibility. And I really appreciated the presentation on the regional plan. And I look forward to participating in that process as we move forward. So thank you for a great meeting.
Thank you, Geronimo. Austin, I'll go on a first name basis.
I have nothing to add.
All right, thank you, Dan. Nothing. Regina?
Hi, yeah, just an FYI, I'm connecting with a couple or so of our state transportation board directors who are attending this Arizona League of Cities and Town Conference this week, namely Director Gary Knight and Director Jen Daniels. Thank you.
Thompson? Jesse Thompson?
I'm good. I'm good.
Jeff, did you have any closing comments? We kind of rushed you through that last part.
No, thank you all again for being here. I know how busy you are, and we try to get through our work expediently, and you covered everything, so thank you.
Yeah, we did have a good meeting. So if there's no other comments, we'll close the meeting here at 11:55. Thank you. We're actually early. I'm surprised.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Everyone. Thank you.
Yeah, an hour ago, I thought we were gonna run way over.
Well, I mean, it looked like that for a minute.
Yeah.